Let's start with the third session today. Before we go back to the item, I'd like to remind members that within and without this meeting, there's this aspiration that we would like to complete as many items as possible, at least to complete the item on Queen Mary Hospital. I think we're quite a bit away from that item, so I'd like that we can make reasonable progress in the upcoming items. So we'll continue with our questions. Any more questions from members on this item? Ms. Tari Lee. Mr. Chairman, we support the proposals in this paper. To offer the students one more choice is reasonable. As pointed out, very soon, the enrollment list for university students will be released very soon. Mainland, Taiwan, and other jurisdictions can also become the choices for our students, apart from local outlets. So, if necessary, we would like to support students going to the mainland for furthering their studies. Any more questions from members? Mr. Michael Tian, you would like to ask questions. Is that correct? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in Beijing, I attended the 2 meetings of the NPC. I visited Hong Kong students studying in Tsinghua University. I had some exchanges with them. Most of them were of the view that to study on the mainland would benefit them either on the mainland or back in Hong Kong when they work in future. That would benefit their future. This is something to do with networking. Very often when we study in universities, we don't just want to enhance our knowledge, we'd also like to know more people. So networking is also very important. For this program, last year over 1,000 students were enrolled and 300 to 400 went eventually. The institutions on the mainland were disappointed. Why is it that many people gave up eventually? I understand that on the mainland there's this program 211 covering 100-odd institutions. They're recognized as the topmost institutions which students would like to enter. Last year, 70-odd participated in the test-free program. So under the 211 program, only 30-odd universities got involved. That is, half of the 70-odd institutions come under this 211 program. In fact, most Hong Kong students enrolled eventually went. In other words, the problem is that the program is very popular. It's just that the remaining 30-odd were not chosen by our students. If we have data to indicate that the 30-odd institutions under the 211 program had enrolled our students and most of them eventually went, then all those institutions under the 211 program should be covered by our own program. Then in future, all the 1,000 odd students would go. So I'd like to know from the administration whether they've heard about this. That is, for those students enrolled, most of them who eventually went entered those 30-odd institutions under the 211 program. If that is the case, how are you going to enlarge the list as to cover all institutions under the 211 program? Bureau? Thank you, Chairman. We've heard about this. what we heard was that normally for students entering the 211 program, chance is higher for them to stay on. And the major cities like Guangzhou, Beijing, and Shanghai found it easier to retain students. Students are more willing to go there. As to how we can expand the list, we'll talk to the Ministry of Education of our country. Can you give us the data later? Offhand, we don't have the data. Well, send me a written reply later. I want to know the answer. Yes, please give us the reply after the meeting. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Very simple, Chairman. Just now, our colleagues asked about recognition. As far as I understand, many overseas universities and mainland universities, many students had applied for certification or recognition. Can the administration provide us with a checklist of the certified or recognized universities so the students know which universities are recognized? Of course, understand that in the past, students had to individually seek recognition or authentication. In the past, the government theoretically should have a list of mainland universities, the qualifications of which would be equivalent to those required by the SARG. Bureau? Mr. Chairman, as far as certification or authentication is concerned, it doesn't depend on the program itself. It depends on each and every courses taken up by the student concerned in the past few years. For the same degree, the subjects taken have to be considered one by one. Well, you said that in the past we had a checklist. Here I don't have the information. I do not know whether or not that checklist represents those universities that would be recognized in future. And also the curricula of programs may change, programs themselves may also change. So we'll consider individual cases on their merits. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have the information. It sounds strange. For Oxford University and Cambridge University, for example, if you tell me that every time the student has to come back to Hong Kong and seek recognition for each and every program or degree, that sounds rather strange. Mr. Wong Yok-man, it's just like what we said in the past item. Well, some students may be seeking study programs on the mainland with a lower quality, leaving more places in Hong Kong for mainland students. That's the conspiracy theory. Now look at the academic institutions on the mainland. For example, the Jiao Tong University of Shanghai was alleged for plagiarism, and Mr. Xi Jinping's thesis had also been queried. So I'm talking about principles. All of us here support the proposals in the paper, but even though with full support at this meeting, I still want to say something. On the mainland, the academia serve the Communist Party. Do you know, Under Secretary? Even though the media serve the Communist Party, Mr. Hu Yaobang was considered as a more open-minded leader. Still, news have to be apportioned in the ratio of 30 to 70% in terms of negative and positive reporting. So, they serve the bureaucracy. Putonghua is excellent. That is, all people have to serve the Communist Party throughout their life. Back in the past, it's better to be a leftist than to be a rightist. And now there are students strive to enter universities for what? For earning a livelihood. Please ask your question. Well, Mr. Chairman, I have to tell you the preamble first to my question. It's very simple. This program is to support our students going to the mainland to further their studies. But the topmost task is to improve our own tertiary education first. Now you're pushing more Hong Kong students to the mainland for their university studies, leaving more places in Hong Kong for mainland students. And eventually, in the long run, this is some sort of infiltration. In future, there will be a lot more Communist Party members in Hong Kong. Mr. Yu Si-wing, Mr. Chairman, to support Hong Kong students furthering their studies on the mainland is to offer them one more choice. And mainland universities offer more subjects than their counterparts in Hong Kong. And the mainland market is bigger. I understand that many Hong Kong students would like to further their studies on the mainland. So it's correct for the SARG to make this arrangement under this program. Look at tourism. Recently, outbound business has remained stable, but there's not much room for development. Many Hong Kong tour guides went to the mainland to lead mainland tour groups, and the mainland does offer them a chance to take out a license. And after obtaining a license, they earn more than in Hong Kong. So the mainland market has given room for development for our next generation. So apart from this program, I'd like the administration to consider giving more chances to the members of the tourism trade. I don't need an answer. Mr. Tony Tse, to enhance resources for our students such that they have more choices, I support that. So I'll support the proposals in the paper. I'd like to ask a follow-up question, though. Paragraph 8 of the paper is about the means test. It applies to secondary students, and it's not the same means test applicable to tertiary students. I'd like to know the reason. And then for this means test for secondary students, the latest review, when was the latest review? My third question is, for these two different systems for means tests, as there are differences between the two, I'd like to know whether the financial assessment aspect will be affected. Thank you for the question. There are two tiers of assistance for secondary students, mainly because the overall subsidy is $15,000 per student. For tertiary students, there are 5 tiers. That means for 5 tiers, for the lowest tier may be 20%, so several $100s out of $15,000 only. That may not be very meaningful. So we would like to adopt the secondary system, that is either 100% or 50%. Would you please speak nearer to the microphone? The other question from the honorable member is when to conduct a review. I have the information here. I'll report to the member after the meeting. Mr. Chairman, I want the date of the last review also. All right, please furnish us with the information. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Chairman, I think for the standard of mainland universities, different people may have different views. Yet, for world-recognized statistics, we should give regard to the number of publications in international journals, and secondly, the number of citations. According to last year's report, for the mainland, they rank second in the publication of articles. As for number of citations, they rank 5th internationally. So an objective assessment is that for those mainland institutions listed here, many of them are familiar, renowned universities. Well, some others may not be so familiar to us, but they're also of a certain standard. So overall speaking, given the articles of international standard and the number of citations, we can see their standard. Therefore, Hong Kong's tertiary education should also diversify. For local higher education, we of course have to enhance it. For those furthering their studies beyond Hong Kong, we should also support them, such that Hong Kong can become more pluralistic and diversified. So the BPA is in support of the proposals in the paper. My question is the same as those of my colleagues. That is, for the amount of subsidy, irrespective of the amount, we have established a mechanism for these means tests. So why should we adopt this one for secondary students? It's difficult to understand. Dr. Helena Wong, Chairman. In my opinion, the Bureau should seriously review and examine whether or not a means test is necessary. You say you adopt this two-tier system instead of 5 tiers. However, previous discussions in the LegCo review that not many wealthy students go to the mainland to further their studies. Most of them go to overseas countries, foreign countries. The same can be seen in your own statistics. So is it really necessary to create 3 civil service posts every year, spending $1.2 million on this means test? Well, basically, under this two-tier system, you approve their applications because most of the applicants are from the middle class and lower class. So you're doing something meaningless. You approve 10 out of 10 applications. For $15,000 per student, the same amount can be used to assist 80 more students. So why should you do something so meaningless? All right, you're asking for over $100 million, but if you can cut the administrative cost and in the creation of posts, then you can subsidize more students. After all, not that many students will go to the mainland to further their studies. Undersecretary? Well, we do have to conduct means tests because we're using public money. According to our plans, in the coming years, more and more students will go to the mainland to further their studies, and the number of beneficiaries under this program will also rise. For these short-term posts, which will last for a few years only, they're mainly to cover the additional means tests, liaison, as well as liaison with mainland universities and those studying on the mainland. Well, Deputy Secretary, if eventually you discover that 10 out of 10 are qualified, then starting from the second year, you don't need to do vetting. As I said, the wealthiest families will send their students overseas to study. So basically, under this program, 10 out of 10 will be approved. So why should you spend this extra $1.2 million? Whether or not you conduct the means test, eventually the applications will be approved. So why do you need a test? Deputy Secretary, in terms of maximizing the use of public money, we really have to conduct this test. Every year we have different applicants. If last year all applicants got approved, we cannot say that this year all applicants would also be approved as well. So we have to maximize the use of our resources.
Dr. Lam Tai-fai, we do not want to classify students. This is quite cruel, but actually that is a fact. The cruel fact is that wealthy students from wealthy family will go to the West or Australia for university education. I think many friends of yours, the Secretary, are doing this. And studying on the mainland has not become a trend yet. The government has to promote that. And we know that there are many good universities in China. And now returning from universities in China may give the students more advantages in Hong Kong. So this mainland university study subsidy scheme has huge potential. The problem is how the government can make the best use of this scheme. Actually, at the panel, we've already discussed this. I don't know whether members have asked this question. As for the MUSSS, whether it will be expanded to Macau and Taiwan, would it only be restricted to the mainland? I think we really have to explore this possibility. It should be broader. And at the last meeting, we talked about 75 universities joining this program. And actually, Project 211 covers the most important schools or the best schools in the mainland, but not many Hong Kong schools know about Project 211. So I hope that other than promoting MUSSS, the government should also be promoting Project 211 so that Hong Kong people would know more about these quality universities in China. Maybe tours can be organized so that students can visit these top universities on the mainland, and this will offer more choices for Hong Kong students. And under Project 211, 38 universities have joined the admission scheme. Maybe our government should talk to its mainland counterparts. Well, you cannot ask Hong Kong students to go to second-tier or third-tier cities for their university studies. I think they would go to Beijing and Shanghai, and actually customs and cultures there are very different. So you really cannot ask Hong Kong students to go to these strange environments. So other than asking us to approve the funding for this scheme, maybe you should also try your best to optimize the scheme and promote the scheme so that more students and parents would know about it. I'm sure in the future, studying on the mainland will become a trend, and it will be a very good platform. And many Hong Kong students will choose the mainland over other countries. But of course, if high government officials like you would take the lead, encourage your children to go to study in the mainland, you would be a role model, and that would be stronger than just talking. Ms. Claudia Mo, well, for this scheme, I think actually you are classifying Hong Kong students. The reality is the reality. For rich students or outstanding students who can get scholarship, they definitely would choose to go to the UK, the US, Australia, and New Zealand. If you ask the young people, how many of them really would love to go to the mainland for university? And when the mainland universities enroll them, would these universities think that this is the mainland policy so that they would give favorable treatment to Hong Kong students? Now, Tsinghua University, Peking University, these are universities that are much sought after by mainland students. So are we going to, our students going to join the fight? And For Hong Kong university students, they are saying that many of our university places are now occupied by mainland students, but they do not use mainland student quota. They are regarded as overseas students. This is really a mess. We do not have enough university places, and many mainland students are taking up these places. So our young people are instead sent to the mainland for university education. This is putting the cart before the horse. You are using public money for this course. And I'm worried that when young people go to the mainland, if they study education or journalism, it's even more scary. Would they learn the mainland style and then come back to teach our young children the mainland way of thinking? This is really serving the party. And for journalism, Hu Yubong's journalism idea is that 80% of the report should be positive, 20%, only 20% of the reports can be negatives. So if our journalism students learn this and then they come back to Hong Kong to practice it, it would be terrible. Now you would say that this is one part. This is a part of our great plan of merging Hong Kong and China. But by doing so, you are actually intensifying the conflicts between Hong Kong and the mainland. I have seen some outstanding mainland students. I asked them why they choose to come to Hong Kong. They say that, first of all, because Hong Kong has freedom, and second, Hong Kong has an international touch. And also, when they come to Hong Kong, they can learn better English. And fourth, they want to stay in Hong Kong. There are 4 major reasons for them to come to Hong Kong. However, now we are trying to urge our young people to go against the current, to go to a sovereignty country which has no freedom for university education. So what choice are you giving them? Well, you say that, oh, for the grassroots students, they have their choice. They can choose not to go. So in principle, I object to this scheme. Next, Mr. Michael Tian. Chairman, I haven't made my position clear. I really support this scheme, because I have first-hand experience. I have talked to the Hong Kong students on the mainland. How do they see this scheme? And as stakeholders, what advantages do they think they have gained? Now, for the Project 211 universities, only 30-odd of them have joined the scheme, so they think this number is too small. Still, there are 74 Project 211 universities that are not on the list. Only 34 of them have joined the admission scheme, and maybe all of their places have been taken up already. So if you want to strengthen the scheme, I think the government should talk to the remaining 74 universities under Project 211. Do you have a timetable? Have you contacted them? Have they told you that they are not interested? Are they the most popular institutions? Mr. Lau? As for the list of institutions, of course, it will be renewed every year. As to whether they are Project 211 or Project 985 institutions, we can express our views. However, I would like to reiterate this, that is, the Ministry of Education has drawn up this list because it wants to meet the needs of different students in Hong Kong. If members look at the enclosure, you can see that some are professional institutions. One is specialized in music, the other is specialized in fashion design. So some of them are professional schools. And we also have to cater for the needs of different students. Some of them would like to study fine arts. I think you've totally missed my point. I'm talking about these 74 institutions. One is on aeronautics, one is on sports. So for the Project 211 institutions, not all of them are highly academic schools. Some of them are specialized schools. And they are specialized in a certain field. So if you want to work with a sports university, why don't you cooperate with the Beijing Sports University? Why do you have to work with Zhengzhou University? Every year, we will talk to the institutions through the Ministry of Education. We will try our best to work with more institutions under Project 211. Dr. Lim Tai-Fai. I think the objectives and incentives of the MUSSS are very good. I think it really deserves our support. Education is sacred. The government has the responsibility to nurture our young, and we also have the responsibility to do that. So this is education. We shouldn't politicize it. We shouldn't say that this is brainwashing. And I think you are just exaggerating. You should be brainwashed. So this is about education. This is not brainwashing. This is just providing another platform for Hong Kong students. Well, of course, the government is to blame because the government does not provide enough places in Hong Kong. If there are not enough university places in Hong Kong, then the government doesn't have to encourage students to go to other places to study. So the root of the problem is that there is a shortage of university places in Hong Kong. So how do we solve this problem? We cannot add so many places right away. So now we are coming out with different solutions so that more students will have the opportunities to further their studies, and then they can make contribution to society. So I think the direction of this scheme is good. The objective is right. Of course, I hope that it can be optimized so that more students can benefit. And I agree with some members. This has to be progressed gradually and orderly. We shouldn't try to achieve everything overnight. Can we join hands with all the Project 211 schools in one go? I think we need to progress gradually. Students have different abilities and potentials. Now, if you speak good English, you have a lot of foreign friends, it doesn't mean that you are betraying our country. So if you learn Putonghua, if you know many mainland friends, it doesn't mean that it's something you shouldn't do. So please, do not query the motivation behind or the incentive behind this scheme. I just want more students to benefit. And I also urge the government to promote this scheme so that students would know that they have other choices and they would know better about mainland universities. Actually, it's very difficult to get into good mainland universities. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, I utterly support this scheme. Me and my Business and Professional Alliance colleagues all support this scheme. This offers another choice for Hong Kong students. I know many Hong Kong students, or I heard from them that they really want to study on the mainland. they are interested in different disciplines, but they all want to go to the mainland. Well, some members say that this is brainwashing education. I don't understand where this comes from. Studying on the mainland means brainwashing, and going to other countries to study is not brainwashing. This is just another choice for Hong Kong students, and the students can decide by themselves. Not everything foreign is good. And now there are many exchange programs between Hong Kong and mainland institutions. So if there is such an opportunity for Hong Kong students for them to study on the mainland, this is really something good. And the Putonghua can be improved. Speaking good English is not supreme. A lot of Hong Kong people may think that their English is already very good, but when you go to Western countries, that's not the case. So speaking good Putonghua is not something bad. A lot of foreigners are now learning Putonghua. Why don't we encourage Hong Kong people to learn better Putonghua? Yes, 75 institutions may not be enough. It's quite a small number, and it does not cover all the areas or provinces. So I hope the government can continue to work harder so that more mainland institutions can join the scheme. Just now, the Undersecretary said that they will continue to liaise with the mainland authorities. So I would like to ask you, are you liaising with the Ministry of Education, or are you talking to institutions or government officials in different provinces? Just now, Mr. Michael Tan also asked you whether you have talked to the mainland institutions. Other than talking to government officials, maybe you can also talk to the higher education institutions in different provinces. That is also very important. Can you let us know more about your work? Now we are talking to the institutions through the Ministry of Education. As for different provinces, we have also contacted the institutions and education departments. However, the official channel is to talk through the Ministry of Education. Well, we know that some of the institutions are interested in the scheme, so we can reflect this to the Ministry of Education and then try to come into contact with those institutions. Ms. Dory Lee. Well, earlier on, some members said that this is a conspiracy, that is using public money to send the students to the mainland. I think this is wrong. Well, we know that in Hong Kong, the higher education sector is very competitive. So if students want to stay in Hong Kong, of course, taking UGC-funded programs would be great. Otherwise, they would have to take associate degree programs. If they choose to go to the mainland, it's definitely their choice. Nobody forces them to do so. So for this subsidy scheme is applicable to both self-financing programs and associate degree programs. So now this scheme is extended to the mainland, so that when students choose to go to the mainland, they will be able to make the trip even though they may not have enough financial background. So I've understood from the students that some of them would really like to study on the mainland, because by doing so they can know more about the mainland. Well, we are all Chinese, however, our thinking and our lifestyles may be different. So I hope that you would not politicize this. Studying on the mainland doesn't mean brainwashing. I think this is not a fair way of putting it.
I agree with the government that this is just a start. We have a lot of universities in the mainland, and frankly speaking, the qualities differ. So later on, it's appropriate for us to conduct reviews later on. Anything to add from the Secretary? I have only one point to add. And for higher education places by 2016-17, we will have, 70% of our students would be able to secure a place in higher education. And our existing level is just around 40%. And later on, for all our students from the 433 system, we'll have enough higher education places. Chairman, this scheme is not a class in national education or 普通话 training. The scheme actually serves as a platform for students to continue university education. Let me cite an example. The Chinese medicine faculty in the Baptist University. If you want to study Chinese medicine in Hong Kong, there aren't many channels, but it's different in the mainland. A lot of mainland universities offer Chinese medicine programs like Fujian, Zhejiang, Hubei, Guangxi, Tianjin, Beijing, Guangzhou, Chengdu. There are so many universities in mainland offering TCM courses. And the Hong Kong is saying that they are putting an emphasis on traditional Chinese medicine training, but in reality, they are not providing enough support or the right platform for the students. So what should these students do if they want to study Chinese medicine? They can choose to take part in this scheme, and they have plenty of opportunities in the mainland. And this way they can develop their talents and learn more about TCM. So this scheme actually serves to supplement the Hong Kong education system, and students can be offered alternative choices, and they can make good use of their talents. So I hope the students, teachers, and the government can work hard to promote the scheme and make good use of this scheme. And it's studying in the mainland is not just about national education or 普通话 training. This concept is absolutely wrong. Mr. Ma Fengkuo. Thank you, Chairman. I'm strongly in favor of this scheme. 10 years ago, when I was a district councillor, I raised this idea to the government. Some members said studying in the mainland is equivalent to accepting a brainwash. This is really regretful that members have such view. When you look at the development of China over the past 20 or 30 years, you can see that the development is primarily driven by the talents, by the homegrown talents. On the long run, developing such opportunities can only benefit Hong Kong students in terms of facilitating understanding of China. We don't have a lot of schools at the moment under the scheme, but I agree that we can develop this scheme slowly and gradually. We have some joint collaboration programs. For example, the United College, which is operated by Zhuhai College and Baptist University. I'm not sure why such programs are not incorporated into this scheme. I think the number of places should increase in the future, and the grants levels to students should also increase. The current level of 15,000 is not a lot given the appreciation of the renminbi. And economically speaking, this scheme is very cost effective. And from an economic point of view, this scheme can alleviate the distress on the places we can provide. So I hope the government can conduct a review as soon as possible in terms of number of places or subsidy amounts or the number of institutions. We should be more positive, and we should enhance this scheme gradually. Any other questions from members? Let's vote on this item. Those who are in favor of paper FCR 2014-215, number 15, please raise your hands. You may put down your hands. Mr. Ray Chan requested a voting by name.
請委員留意。
Members, please be reminded that the item being voted on is paper FCR 15.
現在開始表決。
Let's begin the voting. Before I announce the results, please verify your votes. Voting ends. The results are as follows. We have 48 in attendance, 41 in favor, 5 against, 1 abstention, and the item is passed. The next paper, FCR 2014-15, number 3. This item invites members to approve a new commitment of 1 billion for establishing the Qualifications Framework Fund. And on the 27th of January 2014, the EDB consulted the manpower panel at the Legislative Council, and the administration representatives today include Ms. Pekvin Yong Pui-wan, Deputy Secretary for Education 1. Let's invite Mr. Lee Chuk-yan, Chairman of the Manpower Panel, to report on the meeting results. On the meeting in January this year, and the panel was consulted on the establishment of the Qualifications Framework Fund. Basically, we don't object to the establishment. We are concerned with the funding, and we requested further elaboration on the use of the funds. And I'd like to make a declaration of interest. And I have applied. The CTU has applied to the QF for funding in the past. Mr. Tenka Pugh, and I was a member of the panel for automobile services under the QF. And the fund seeks to improve the standing of professionals which are non-academic in nature, and we have a few concerns. First, for industries which take part in the QF, for practitioners who have taken part in the QF, would their salaries and social standing be enhanced? Have you conducted any evaluations or studies? And the second concern, would it lead to a vicious cycle in which the employers would not raise the salaries of the practitioners, but if the practitioners don't have the qualifications, they won't be hired at all? So would there be any pressure for the employees? And the third concern is, and for the automobile maintenance industry, we have a lack of new blood. So what is your take on the issue? Ms. Young. So let me respond to the first question. For practitioners under the qualifications framework, would their salaries and social standing be enhanced? The objective of the QF is actually to promote lifelong learning for the people of Hong Kong. And through this fund, through this framework, we are hoping to enhance the overall competitiveness of Hong Kong's labor force. And under this premises, the success of the QF cannot be evaluated from the salaries of the practitioners. And as we understand from the employers, if they have staff who have received funding from the QF, this factor would be reflected in the annual appraisals. And the qualifications framework in Hong Kong is a voluntary mechanism, and we hope more industries can join. And for employers who are already under this framework, they can make good use of this system for their staff. And for staff who are not qualified under QF, would it be difficult for them to find a job? As I mentioned, this framework is voluntary in nature, and the system is different from the mainland, which is more mandatory in nature. So we wouldn't have cases in which an employee is not hired because he or she lacks the qualification under QF. And for job recruitment apps, the presence of the QF actually helps people in Hong Kong to find a job. And we hope that this trend can continue into the future, and we hope more and more people can know about QF. Next, Michael Tian. For the qualifications framework, as some members have pointed out, this framework can potentially bring great benefits to Hong Kong, but the key is that we have to use it properly. Right now, we have more than 10 industries who are setting up qualification standards under QF. And some of the factories in Hong Kong now are monitored by the government, and the QF might possibly create a lot of opportunities for them. And one example is the elderly care sector. And they would these institutions or elderly homes would give injections to the elderly, and for most elderly care centers, they lack the right staff to carry out these operations or medical operations. Right now, only nurses are qualified to carry out these operations. And elderly homes do not need a license to perform these operations, but yet they don't have enough staff to perform this task, and they don't have enough nurses. Right now, if you can train up enough people to carry out these medical operations, you can solve the problem. But the government is saying that only nurses can carry out this task. And the VTC had offered a pilot course, and all the graduates from that course were recruited right away, and yet the course did not continue. So we are talking about the QF level 4. If the government can release some of the tasks which were once under the government's control, then that would alleviate the situation. Perhaps the EDB is not responsible for this. The point is you have to liaise with the right government departments. Secretary, please. Thank you very much for the question. The elderly care sector has established its own consultation committee under the QF. And this advisory committee consists of representatives from the Social Welfare Department.
去要制定一個能力標準說明，當中其實
So there must be a competency specifications. So they'll spell out the details for the job types. Of course, in the consultative committee, the SWD did offer some advice. In that process, if a certain industry has reached consensus, then it should discuss with the departments concerned. As for the ITAC for elderly services, it has already provided a platform. Well, the problem is that the ITAC came to fetch me to say that they've already formed certain concepts which were not accepted by the administration. So where is the ball now? In whose court is the ball? They can't do it on their own. The problem lies with the government's regulations. Deputy Secretary, for these processes that you mentioned, are they medical treatment? Should only nurses and other trained personnel conduct the procedures? I think we must set up a QF first before we can decide who should do what. I suggest that the Secretary for Education resort to other avenues to assist Mr. Tian. This is not directly related to the QF fund. Next, Mr. Poon Siu Ping. Mr. Chairman, I have to first of all declare that my association did assist in the assessment work of QF. Now, this is recurrent funding. $1 billion have been earmarked for this. In paragraph 31, there would be a rate of return of 5%, $50 million per year. And now 46% of the workforce had been covered. For this expected funding, it is to cope with the planned QF. But the QF will expand. How many more ITACs will you set up? Do you have any objectives? And in this funding proposal, have you ever calculated for how long the sum can last? Mr. Chairman, starting from the 1st of July, we set up the 20th ITAC in Human Resources Management, and it is an interdisciplinary ITAC. With this new ITAC, we've already covered 48% of the total workforce. The honourable member was concerned that given this 5% of rate of return with $50 million, can something new be done? May I refer you to enclosure 2 of the paper. That is the actual expenditure under the support program for QF. The maximum expenditure in the past was $30 million per year. So we now plan for $50 million of return every year. Part of that has covered new elements, as mentioned in the paper. That is to support the ITACs to launch certain tasks, or we can conduct certain study projects, or enhance publicity and promotion. So this is on top of the existing framework. With members' approval, if we can establish this QF fund, then every year we can have an expected return of $50 million per year. Dr. Chang Lai-wan, will we support the proposal in the paper? Would you please speak into the microphone? We're of the view that there is a chance for this QF to allow youngsters to have upward mobility. That would be a very good avenue. Well, how can we assist young people to have upward mobility? Well, clearly we must have ladders for upward mobility, and can you offer higher wages to these young people? It depends very much on the attitude of the employers. I did receive views from the beauticians, from the beauty industry. The questions were if their personnel completed certain training programs with certificates, would the employers recognize the qualifications and give them a higher salary? I think you have to face this issue squarely. I think you have to study how the administration can assist them. And can the government set a good example? Can certain jobs in the government follow the different qualifications under the QF? That is, within the government, you can provide certain posts to entertain certain qualifications, and with different qualifications, can they get different salaries? Bureau, thank you, Dr. Chang, for her question. Say, when the Civil Service Bureau recruits civil servants, can we also cover qualifications under the QF? We're exploring this with the CSB. But we have to understand that the nature of work of civil servants is a bit different from that in the private sector. So we're now looking into special circumstances to see whether there are easier scenarios for a solution. So we are discussing with the CSB. In the government, we hugely encourage employers, particularly those in industries and trades with ITACs, to formulate QFs in terms of recruitment and employment. Clearer competencies should be written under the QF, and we can see that more and more employers are using the QF. Mr. Chairman, I'm very pleased to hear that from the Bureau. I hope that they can help our young people and encourage them to have upward mobility. We're spending $10 billion of public money on this, so I hope that they can do better. Next, Mrs. Regina Ip. Mr. Chairman, I also support the QF, which can assist the employees in various trades and industries to enhance their professional qualifications, irrespective of whether or not they have received university education, and they can have added value. And what about the beauticians trade, where there are so many female employees, like South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan? They have developed themselves into a hub for hair beauty and general beauty. So do you have any plan to cover that under your QF? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mrs. Ip. Indeed, much earlier, we had set up an ITAC for the beauty industry and a hair beauty industry. ITAC had been set up, and a QF had also been launched. Say, in the beauty industry, for those who have not received formal education, by way of their experience and knowledge in the industry, under the past QF, we can also promulgate or give them professional qualifications such that they can move upwards. Are these qualifications interfacing with the international standards? Well, under the QF, there's no specified objective to interface with the international standards. However, in accordance with the individual situation of individual trades and industries, certain qualifications under the QF may be able to interface with the international standards. Before this particular program, we're only concerned about this local QF. So we did not compare ourselves with international QFs. Dr. Joseph Lee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it strange with the discussion. I support the proposals in the paper. A few years ago, a piece of legislation was enacted in the LegCo in relation to the administration's statutory powers. Just look at the paper. This time, they're mainly doing 4 things under the proposals. That's on page 2 of the paper. I'd like to seek clarification from the administration in relation to elderly services. According to the ITAC on elderly services, my understanding is that they have level 4. They have up to level 4 for their qualifications. That's precisely how the QF can clarify competencies and allow members of a particular industry to have upward mobility. Well, I think Mr. Michael Tan shouldn't ask his questions under this paper. I think he should refer his questions to the relevant ITAC to see whether certain competencies can be covered. Now, this has nothing to do with the nurses. In different job types, for different elders, different qualifications may be required. So we must not adopt a broad brush approach. You cannot just say that you must attain a certain level in terms of a particular task. I think some other people might have given Mr. Michael Tan a wrong impression. So the ITAC and elderly services are not just about special treatment and job types. Mrs. Ip mentioned the beauty industry, the hair beauty industry, and so forth. I hope that they can report back to the relevant panels of the LegCo to what extent they've been able to assist a certain trade or industry. When it comes to level 4 of a QF, is equivalent to secondary school education. If you read the piece of legislation concerned, you'll understand the situation. I support this funding proposal, but please do not misunderstand that we're talking about specific jobs for elderly services. The chairman was correct in referring the honourable member to the relevant panel of the LegCo. Any more questions from members? If not, I'll put this item to the vote. With those in favour of the proposals in paper FCR 2014-15-3, please raise their hands. Thank you. Those against, please raise their hands. Any abstention? No. So I think the majority of the voting members are in support of the proposals. The proposals are endorsed. Next item, paper FCR 2014-15-14. This item invites members to approve a new commitment of $64.2 million for establishment of filling stations for the digital terrestrial television service, DTT service of Radio Television Hong Kong, RTHK. On the 9th of December 2013 and the 10th of March 2014, the LegCo's ITB panel was consulted. To answer members' questions, we have in attendance Ms. Susie Ho, Permanent Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development for Communications and Technology, Mr. Joe Wong, Deputy Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, also for Communications and Technology, Mr. Edward To, the Principal Assistant Secretary, Mr. Tai Kin Man, Deputy Director of Broadcasting, Ms. Leonia Tai, Deputy Director of Broadcasting, and Mr. Leung Chi Hua, Head for Engineering for RTHK. Now, I'd like to call upon the panel chairman, Mr. Wong Yok Man, to report the results of their discussion. Thank you. The IDP panel on the 9th of December 2013 and the 10th of March 2014 convened meetings to listen to the government's report and briefing on the setting up of 22 filling stations for DTT service for RTHK. The majority of members of the panel supported the administration's proposals to expand the coverage of DTT service from 75% to 99% of our population. Some members urged the administration to enhance the infiltration rate for DTT service. The administration said that RTHK would enhance publicity and promotion to make progress in the implementation of DTT service. Dr. Lam Tai-Fai? Thank you, Chairman. This is a question out of curiosity. From the paper, I can see that every day the administration received complaints and inquiries, probably in relation to reception. So they want more filling stations to expand the coverage of the DTT service of RTHK from 75% to about 99% of the population. I don't know why it is 99% and not 100%. Are they worried about the resultant quality such that public complaints were still received? And then they will say, we promised only 99%, not 100%. So physically, is this 99% the maximum percentage? Can it be 100%? Is it a technical issue, or they just want to quote this percentage to address public complaints? Permanent Secretary? Well, overall speaking, the coverage would only be 99%. That's about all. Given the topography and geography of Hong Kong, we'll need a lot more filling stations before we can attain 100%. Now, the coverage is only 90-odd%. In reality and technically, is it impossible to attain 100%? May I defer to my RTHK colleagues who will answer this? Ms. Tai? Technically, this is feasible, but because of the topography of Hong Kong and with so many high-rise buildings, we need many more filling stations before we can attain 100%. This 99% is actually the requirement for commercial licensees. Now, the RTHK is developing its DTT network, so we would like to be on a par with our private counterparts. We need more time to reach 100%. Mr. Albert Chan, a very simple piece of opinion. A certain scenario is very absurd. In certain areas and districts, they can receive very clear signals for telephone services and television services from the mainland. So don't tell me that these people can only receive signals and programs from the mainland and not from RTHK. This happens in many districts in Hong Kong, but this is an absurd scenario that shouldn't have happened. Any more questions? Then I'll put the proposals to the vote. Will those in favor of the proposal in paper FCR 2014-15-14 please raise their hands? Thank you. Those against, please raise their hands. No. Any abstention? I think the majority of the voting members are in favor of the proposals. The proposals are endorsed. Next item, FCR 2014-15-19. This paper is to endorse the recommendation of the Public Works Subcommittee at its meeting on the 19th of March 2014. That is the contents in paper 36 of that subcommittee. There's no request for a separate voting in the Finance Committee. If there are no questions, any questions? Then I'll put this item to the vote. Will those in favor of the recommendations in paper FCR 2014-15-19 please raise their hands? Thank you. Those against, please raise their hands. No. Any abstention? No. I think the majority of the voting members are in favor of the proposals. The proposals are endorsed. Next, FCR 2014-15-27. This item invites members to approve A new non-recurrent commitment of $1.063 billion under Head 62 Housing Department, Subhead 700, General Non-Recurrent for the provision of 1 month's rent for tenants or licensees living in the public rental units of the Hong Kong Housing Authority and the Hong Kong Housing Society. And B, a new non-recurrent commitment of $2.674 billion under Head 170, Social Welfare Department, Subhead 700, General Non-Recurrent for the provision of an extra payment to Comprehensive Social Security Assistance CSSA recipients equal to 1 month of the CSSA standard rates, and an extra payment to old age allowance, including those payable under the Guangdong scheme, old age living allowance, and disability allowance recipients equal to 1 month of the allowances.
On the 7th of April 2014, the Housing Panel of the LegCo has been consulted, and the Labour and Welfare Bureau has also consulted the Welfare Services Panel. To answer members' questions, we have the following government officials. Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing, Ms. Agnes Wong. Assistant Director of Housing, Mr. Anson Lai. Chief Manager Management, Mr. Chiu Pak Long. Chief Manager Management, Mrs. Julie Ma Leung. And Deputy Director of Social Welfare, Ms. Maria Lau, and Chief Social Security Officer, Mr. Nwai Kun. First of all, I would like to invite Mr. Wong Kwok Hing, the Chairman of the Housing Panel, to report on the discussion result of the panel. Thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman of the Housing Panel, I would like to report to you on what we discussed. On the 7th April 2014, we discussed this proposal. Members supported that this proposal be submitted to the FC for consideration. The panel supports that the government provides 1 month's rent for tenants' licenses living in the public rental units of the Hong Kong Housing Authority and the Hong Kong Housing Society. However, some members have reflected the views of some tenants because for this year's budget, it is only proposed that 1 month's rent will be provided, but not 2 months as in the previous year. Some members also asked that the government launch continuous measures to help alleviate the pressure on the non-CSSA recipients in the waiting list. Thank you, Chairman. Next, Ms. Chen Yuhan. Well, on the 12th of May 2014, we discussed the relevant issues, and this is about a one-off relief measure for Social Security recipients. However, some members suggested that these one-off measures should become permanent. Mr. Frederick Fong, I would like to ask the government, now this sum of money will be given to the Hong Kong Housing Authority and the Hong Kong Housing Society. However, please speak into the microphone. I'm sorry, I have a sore throat. Well, for the HA and the HS, the tenants will be waived 1 month's rental. However, there's Tai Hang West Estate is under another society. It's also for low-income people. The units were sold to low-income families through this organization. So how come this 1 month's rent waiver is not granted to Tai Hang West Estate? For the Housing Society, estates, they were excluded from the first round of rental waiver, and then the housing society estates were included. So this time around, they also want Tai Hang West estates to be included. Thank you, Chairman. For your first question, now we are applying for $1063 million, and some of them will be given to Hong Kong Housing Authority tenants, and a small amount of them will be given to Hong Kong excess state tenants. As for Tai Hang West Estate, the nature is a bit different. It's run by a private company. Although it offers low rentals for low-income families, is different from the HA and the HS estates. And HS tenants are similar to HA tenants. So that's why we have extended the plan to cover HS tenants. However, Tai Hang West estate is different, so we are not extending to that estate. Next, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Chairman. Of course, I support the funding request because for Social Security, well, for CSSA recipients, old age allowance recipients, etc., they have been waiting for this for a long time. Public housing tenants hope that they can get 2 months free rental, but this time around they only give them 1 month, but I think it's still okay, so I hope that this can be approved as soon as possible. Chairman, after passing this, we only have less than half an hour left for this session, and for the next session we have only 2 hours, and we still have items to go before we reach the funding request for Queen Mary Hospital. And for the low-income family subsidies, we still have 18 items to go, so I hope that we can proceed faster. Yes, we understand. Next, Mr. Lee Chak-yan. Every year we have the same item, so I don't have much to say, but every year I make the same request. That is, if you think that we should give 1 more month's CSSA and 1 more month's old age allowance, then we should actually review CSSA and whether the standard rates can meet people's daily expenditure. And today we are not talking about universal retirement protection, but the Labour Party has been talking about this for a long time. That is, whether the CSSA standard rates can meet with people's needs. Government, do you want to answer the question? I think the SWD colleague can answer the question. Now we are offering this one-off relief measures. As the FS said in the budget speech, he said that the government has considered that a number of regular measures have been implemented for helping the needy. And this year, the inflation rate has slowed down a bit, and he has also looked at the financial position of the government. So he thinks that a one-off relief measure is sufficient. As for meeting the needs of CSSA recipients, actually we have an established mechanism. That is, we will look at the Social Security commodity rates, and then we will make sure that we can meet the spending power of the people. Yes, we understand that we do that every year, but we are not just looking at the commodity price. We should actually look at the CSS rate and see if it can meet the basic needs of daily lives. For example, now people have to use internet, so how about their on the internet fees? Mr. James Tan. Yes, Mr. Wong reminds us that we should go fast, and I would like to, I don't want to be seen as part of the filibustering force. And I've heard that we've been talking a lot about the wealth gap. We think that the vulnerable should be helped, so I support this proposal. But as to whether this measure should become permanent, I think, well, now we have money in the coffers, so we can implement this one-off measures, but we need to monitor the financial position every year, so I don't think this measure should become permanent. Mr. Wong Yuk-man, ever since 2010, each year in the budget, the government would hand out sweeteners. As for PRH tenants, 2 months' rent will be waived. This has already become a habit, and this year around, the FS has gone crazy, and suddenly it's reduced from 2 months to 1 month. So it's like adding fuel to the fire. To the grassroots, he said that he has already implemented a number of measures to help the poor, and the inflation rate has slowed down. These were the reasons he used. Well, has the inflation rate really slowed down? I think for the grassroots, the living has become more and more, their lives has become more and more difficult. The CSSA rate really cannot meet the needs of people's daily lives. So for 2 months rents, do you think it can already relieve people's difficulty? And now you are even cutting it to 1 month. And at the same time, the Housing Authority announced that from September onwards, there will be a rental increase, and each household would have to pay $200 to $387 more. And after increasing the rents, there will not be a 1 month, an extra month's rental waiver. So it's like they are beggars. They are begging you for money. We are forced to support this, even though it's just 1 month. Otherwise, we will be criticized. But you want people to beg you, so I really want to make use of this opportunity to reprimand you. So do you think the grassroots are beggars? This is not handing out alms. This is something they deserve. You have a lot of money in the coffers, and this money belongs to the people. Why do you treat them as beggars? You want them to kneel down and beg you for 1 more month, and you are not giving them that extra month. This is really like giving alms, and this is unacceptable. The government has such a rich reserve, and it's not humane. If you want to talk about conscience, it's like talking to Mr. Andy Zhang. He says, what is conscience? You have your conscience and I have my conscience. I haven't finished yet. Don't interrupt. Please do not use humiliating language. Whom am I humiliating? Whom am I humiliating? Please pay attention to that. I don't want to say anything. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Whether a government is supported by the people actually is something very simple. Last year, rental was not increased, and the 2 months rental waiver were given. But this year, only 1 month is given, and the rent is increased. The FS says that people should not always rely on the government. And for the OH living allowance, we don't really need an extra month's allowance. If you relax the means test, the government has adopted a mechanism which can be adjusted both upwards and downwards. That is, the rental ceiling cannot exceed the tenant's median income by 10%. I objected to that at that time, but I was criticized. You changed the cap. I think we all remember that. It's because of this the government cannot increase the rent. It can only freeze the rent. As you have, well, that 10%, if you don't talk about it, it does not exist anymore. Now well, for those who voted for the bill, I think they should kill themselves. Now you are saying that the government is giving out too little. And Lang Sing. Now it seems that the pro-establishment camp is filibustering. What questions do you have for the government? I'm asking you, why don't you draw a line today? Do you have any questions for the government? I'm asking you. It's not time to ask me questions. You don't draw a line? I'm putting the question to the chairman. Don't you draw a line today? Have you finished? You finished? So today you will not draw a line. Okay. And I would like to ask this. Well, my constituents ask you why a month's rental waiver has been cut. Is there a logic when you make this decision? First of all, about the PRH rental adjustment mechanism, it has nothing to do with this one-off relief measure. So why this year there's only a provision of 1 month's rent in the budget? The FS already said that he has to consider a lot of factors. For example, the economic prospects, the external environment, etc. How come he continued to waive rates? Well, for those who pay rates, they are rich people. So why does he continue to waive rates? If the government is so rich, it should cut the policies that are the measures that benefits the rich first. Why is that? What kind of principles does the FS adopt? The government does not have any supplementary answers. I think I cannot speak on behalf of the FS concerning other relief measures. The Deputy Secretary does not want to supplement. Any other member would like to speak? If members have no other questions, I shall put this item to the vote. Will those members in favor of the proposal FCR 2014-15-27 please raise their hands? Please lower your hands. Those against, please raise their hands. Abstention? No. I think a majority of the members voting are in favor of the proposal. The proposal is approved. Next item is FCR 2014-15-20. Members are invited to approve the creation of a new commitment of $100 million under Head 53, Government Secretariat, Home Affairs Bureau, to establish a multifaceted excellence scholarship. On the 24th of March 2014, the Home Affairs Bureau has consulted the Home Affairs panel of this Council. We have two government officials to answer members' questions. Deputy Secretary for Home Affairs, Ms. Gracie Fu, and PAS for Home Affairs, Mr. Vincent Fong, and Mr. Ma Fong Kok, Chairman of the Home Affairs panel, will make a report. The Home Affairs panel on the 24th of March 2014 discussed the government's proposal of setting up a multifaceted excellence scholarship, and the amount is $100 million. Many members supported the government's proposal. Members noted that for this proposal, it will provide assistance universities and tertiary institutions, and that will start from the year 2015-2016. There will be 20 places, and these scholarships will be given to local students who have excellent performance in the areas of arts, social service, etc. Some members hope that the number of awardees can be increased. And it also called on the government to notice that some students would achieve excellently in the areas other than academics. However, they may not be able to meet the criteria to be admitted into university. So it hopes that the government can increase the number of scholarships to 20. Dr. Lam Tai Fai. Well, I support the establishment of the multifaceted excellence scholarship in principle. However, I have a lot of questions.
I have a lot of questions to that, but I dare not ask a lot because I don't want to be seen as the likes of Mr. Albert Chan. And you're admitting students who are outstanding in sports, arts, or community service. I'm not very sure how you decide which 20 students would benefit, because every year we have way more than 20 students who are outstanding in these scopes. You shouldn't be so stringent with your money. How do you distribute the number of students in each aspect? Are you going to assign equal shares to these students? And the panel is made up of reputable persons from the arts, sports, and community service. I'm not sure whether I'm a qualified person, and I'm not sure Mr. Leung Kwok Hong is qualified. And I guess it's not easy to find the right people with these credentials, and more often we have people who are only familiar with the arts or only familiar with the sports, etc. And are you going to use objective standards, for example, medal winners? So there might be a case of unfairness, and this way it will be unfair to the students, and we might be accused of being unreasonable. For the 20 places, can we further increase the number from 20? And for the selection committee, what kind of people do we have, and can we have more people? Can we have more members in the selection committee? Who can answer this question? Ms. Fu. Thank you very much, Chairman, and for the question. The number of places under this scholarship has been discussed with our various stakeholders, and we have consulted the University Grants Committee. We consulted the school principals, and the panel also consists of education and youth affairs experts. And we also consulted principals from secondary schools. And since we began coming up with this idea, we had decided that 20 is the right figure. And 2 or 3 years later, we will conduct a review on the scholarship. And with the right support from the community and the different sectors, we can make adjustments. And as discussed under the panel of Home Affairs, we also talked about the distribution of those 20 places for students in the sports, arts, and community service, and this has been outlined in our paper. And we believe that the selection committee will select students from different aspects, but we won't assign specific numbers. Mr. Raymond Wong. the scholarship aims to support students who are outstanding in sports, arts, or community service, and admit them to undergraduate programs. And of course, we would support this scheme. And for SFNOC and the Hong Kong Sports Institute would only cover a small number of students. And in other words, only a small number of students can benefit from this scholarship. And you cannot benefit students with other kinds of talents. And therefore, we have 20 places at the moment. Will you consider increasing the number of places? And second, for these students, if they are admitted to self-financed higher education institutes, the qualities might differ, and it might be a sticky situation for them. If they are admitted to not very good schools, what can they do? Are you going to draw up some standards? Let me cite an example. Some students might give up on education after receiving this scholarship, and according to the UGC stipulations, they have to return the scholarship, the grants. Will you add a condition to stipulate that the students must complete their degree programs? Thank you very much for the question. If the scholarship goes according to plan, we will come back to the FC to ask for extra funding. Right now, we are asking for the initial cost of starting up this scholarship, and students actually have flexibility in selecting what they want to study, including UGC funded programs and self-finance programs. Hong Kong has a lot of self-financing programs in sports, performing arts. They might not be covered under the 8 UGC institutes. And this way, students have a lot of options in order to maximize their talents. So we see this as an appropriate solution, and we respect the views and the views of the students. And the minimum entry requirement is 3322, which is a very basic requirement. And we hope that students under this scholarship can complete their undergraduate programs. Would you introduce a clause to stipulate that the students must complete their undergraduate studies? We don't see a need to do so. If the students are admitted to the institutions already, we would support them. We would support these students to complete their programs. Our concern, on the other hand, is that if these students are to take part in competitions, they might need to stop studying for a period of time. In fact, a lot of universities have admitted outstanding sports persons, and these students might have to take part in a lot of contests. And this is a culture we hope to promote through this scholarship. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, Mr. Lam Tai-fai said he doesn't want to filibuster. Well, I'm very sure he knows, because he's in the pharmaceutical industry. It's scary. He's really good at filibustering without you even knowing. So well, jokes aside, I don't think he would do it. I think this kind of scheme must be convincing to the public. And I've received 2 social service orders, so I'm very familiar with social services. When we talk about sports, I play soccer all the time, and I also write sports columns, and I should be part of the selection committee. And with this 100 million funding, only a small number of students can benefit. And traditional institutions would only take care of their own members. So you have to expand the base. So, Chairman, I have a suggestion. We can conduct a vote online. We can have, if we have an online vote, then it would be more convincing. And the panel can be selected by voting. And the selection process can be solved by voting. What do you think, Chairman? Do you think, well, this is a question you should ask the administration. Any response from the administration? The nomination committee would select 20 students, and ultimately whether they are accepted would be decided by the universities. I think this is very clear from according to the paper. Whether the universities would admit these students is different from, is an entirely different matter. I'm referring to whether the community thinks that these 20 students are worthy of the scholarship. Were there any cases in which these students weren't accepted by the universities? Were there any cases in which the universities reject the scholarship proposals? I can only respond according to the existing mechanism. You will only follow the existing framework. The government is granting these scholarships, so there's no way the schools would not admit these students. Anything to add from the administration? Students chosen by the selection committee would conduct interviews, would undergo interviews with the universities, and at the end of the day, we are only recommending the students for the scholarship, but the universities would ultimately decide whether or not to admit them. And the nomination for the students would actually take place before the HKDSE. If the universities are willing to accept the students, they will give conditional offers to the students. I'd like to refer to paragraph 10b on the shortlisting and selection of candidates. It says that we will be a set of objective criteria will be used during the shortlisting. For arts, the controversy is relatively less, but for social service, what are your standards or criteria? What kind of elements are you looking at? For example, for opposing parties, we are not just we don't just go on protests. We also do a lot for the community. Does social service comprise social movements? For example, students who object to national education, or people who promote real democracy or suffrage, universal suffrage. Are these people going to be labeled as anti-social service? So what are your criteria when you consider social service? Thank you very much for your question. We have considered the criteria in which the students will be deemed outstanding by the school principals. For arts students, we would look at their performances or competitions. And for social service, we would look at the number of hours served in the community, the service targets, etc. And nominating these students through scholarship is relatively new. And we have had scholarships for or subsidies for sports students for a long time, but for social service, the concept is still relatively new. And we have a lot of youth groups or the Youth Commission. The Youth Commission has worked with the HAB to recommend the top 10 outstanding youths. So we do have similar experience, and we are adopting a more objective set of standards to recommend students. And we would work with school principals to come up with a list of outstanding students, and we would look at different criteria. Well, of course, if you're talking about very traditional social service like the Boy Scouts or the Red Cross, of course, it's very easy to set the standards. But for other types of social service, can you really gauge these students with very traditional criteria? We would not pre-screen the types of social service or the type of activities. So how do you issue guidelines to the schools? We will announce the guidelines very soon. So we must have a set of guidelines before this scholarship can be put in place. Students must receive nominations from their secondary school principals, and they must also be approved to be the nomination committee, and we will have 20 or more nominees. And finally, they will be interviewed by the universities before they are accepted. Next, Mr. Kenneth Chan. Well, universities are free in accepting whichever students they prefer. So this is one point we have to bear in mind. The universities have the ultimate decision. So we do have a lot of unpredictable elements which might not be covered by the paper. And 20 places actually refers to the upper limits. So in theory, the selection committee would interview more than 20 students. You're not just looking at academic performance, but their achievements in arts, sports, or leadership. As the secretary said, during the screening or interviewing process, the students might not have finished their exams, and as such, the universities have to estimate whether these students would fulfill the minimum academic requirements. For instance, out of the 20 students, if half of them failed the Chinese subject or the English subject, then they cannot be admitted. So this is something we must understand. We must understand how it works. So I think the nomination committee must make it very clear in the future that apart from the 20 candidates they prefer the most, they also have a list of students on waiting lists. And you have to think about how you disseminate the information in order to ensure fairness and for the public and the students. And the criteria are very objective for the university. So I think this is a message the government has to reinforce for the scholarship. The universities have the final say. So can the government confirm what I said is true and accurate? So that said, I hope the members can support this scholarship. So the government should not just consider 20 students. You have to think about more students. Thank you very much. I confirm that your interpretation is correct. This is the way we work. So as mentioned in all our papers, there will be 20 students, but over the course of nomination or screening, we will have very likely we would have more than 20 students. So we cannot say for sure the number of students who would receive the scholarship at the end. We are not going to set an upper limit. Let's say if we have 25 or 30 students nominated, then they can all be accepted in theory. We are not going to set an upper limit. So we are asking for 100 million, and we would make the best use of the 100 million. Last question, Mr. Lem Tai Fai.
If this funding proposal is approved today, my understanding is that at the end of this year, that is at the end of 2014, secondary school principals will have to submit applications. So time is running out. So we'd like to know the selection procedures which may affect their choices. If Mr. Leung Kwok Hong becomes a member of the selection panel, I won't submit any application because he may do it randomly and casually. Now, you mentioned the very famous figures in the art and culture sectors. If you don't select the right persons, our students may be affected in the long run because you must choose the familiar professionals to us. 20 quotas only, 25% on the average in terms of opportunity. I asked you whether there's a policy on the distribution of quotas. You said no. The sports community or the arts community in future may not get any quota at all, and they will query us. So in this society, you don't need to worry about adequacy. You need to worry about distribution, whether it is even distribution. So how are you going to form the selection panel? Who will be the selection panel members? And then there must be a quota system. Otherwise, I don't know the quotas to be given to each sector. What about art, design, sports, and so forth? How many students should I recommend? I may be competing with myself, and the students may suffer. So you must have clear objectives and clear quotas, such that the awardees deserve the scholarship. The selection panel will be formed with prudence. Maybe it is not most appropriate to choose the famous persons. We should identify different representatives from different sectors. For these three sectors, we have art, sport, and social service. So there are bound to be members from these three sectors. We'd also look at the school subjects. So there must be some representatives from the education sector. We don't have any plan yet. It's only with approved funding from the FC that we'll work out the details. Every secondary school can recommend one student. I think the school principal understands most who should be the best candidate. How many members in the panel? We don't have a final plan, maybe 4 to 5. If members don't have further questions, I'll put the item to the vote. With those in favor of the proposals in paper FCR 2014-15-20, please raise their hands. Thank you. Those against, please raise their hands. No? Any abstention? No? So I think the majority of the voting members are in favor of the proposals. The proposals are endorsed. Our next meeting will start at 4:40 p.m., 6 minutes from now.